Hi, AP Computer Science students. Today we're going to talk about the for loop. So as we talked about before, we have at least 3 different ways that we can repeatedly execute instructions until a goal has been reached. We've already talked about the while loop. Later on we're going to talk about the do while loop, but today we're going to talk about the for loop. All right, so here's the general structure for a for loop. With that while loop, we had our initialization and our condition and our update hanging out all over the place. With the for loop, they're all going to be hanging out all on one line, all together. So we start with the initialization, so you can create a new variable there, or you can use one that already exists. You have your condition. Remember, our condition is some sort of Boolean expression. And then we have our update, so how it changes each time. So in the example, we have for int I equals 5, so that means we are creating a new variable called I that has the beginning value of 5. Our condition, again, we want to keep in mind that we want to phrase this in terms of how long can we keep going, not are we there yet. So we want to keep going as long as I is less than or equal to 10. And then we have our update hanging out right here. We have I++. Remember, that's the shortcut for I equals I plus 1 or I plus equals 1. Fancy way for saying that we're adding 1 to I each time. So each time through, we are adding, so here we have a variable called sum in there. It must have been declared and initialized earlier within this program, but each time through we're going to add the numbers 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to whatever was in sum before. All right, so if we take a look at this example, so we have in I equals 0, so this is our initialization. We are going to continue as long as I is less than 10, and then we have our I++. All right, so if this is our console hanging out here, and we kind of do some hand tracing, so we have a variable called I, which has the initial value of 0. We enter into the for loop, and we print out I. Once we get to the bottom of our loop, that's when the update happens. Okay, so I++, so I now has a value of 1. And then we ask ourselves, all right, is I less than 10? Yep, it is. So then we enter into the loop and we print out I. I currently has the value of 1. We move further down. When we get to the end, that's when we do the update. So we have our I++, so we add 1 to I. I is less than 10, so we continue on, and the result of our program, and my console isn't big enough, but the result of my program is going to be printing out on separate lines the integers 0 through 9. We're not going to print out 10 because we're only continuing as long as I is strictly less than 10, and that's our output. Okay, so we could achieve this same just printing out the numbers 0 through 9 with a while loop as well. But remember, a while loop has kind of these same 3 pieces, but kind of split up among our program. So outside, someplace before we create our loop, we have this initialization value, so int I equals 0. Then we would have our while, so we're going to have while I is less than 10. Okay. And then I'm going to be lazy. Instead of writing out system.out.println, I'm just going to do SOP, and I'm going to print I. Okay, so these guys are the same here. Within my loop, I would do my I++ as my update. Okay, so the left and right sides of my code are essentially equivalent. The for loop is super nice because all of your 3 pieces of information, your initialization, your condition, and your update are all on one line. It is a lot harder to leave one of those pieces out. On the right-hand side, we have our while loop achieving the exact same thing, and those 3 pieces of information are more spread out. A for loop is great if you know exactly how many times you want to complete a process. So if you know that you want to complete something 10 times, or you want to repeat it a specified number of times, a for loop is probably going to be your better bet. A while loop, like think of it in terms of, let's say you want to have a game, and like at the end of the game it says, do you want to play again? And as long as it's yes, we play it again. So that would be where it's more open-ended. Sometimes that while loop is a better fit. All right. So now we're going to try it out, and now we're going to flip-flop so that we're printing out the even numbers from 10 to 1, so we're counting backwards. We'll do the cheater way first, where we can kind of figure out in our head, say, hey, even numbers, that would be like 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. All right, so we will keep that in mind. So I'm going to start with for int I equals, and I'm going to start at 10. I want to continue as long as I is greater than or equal to 1, because I want from 10 to 1. I should probably have put inclusive in here. And then to get to the next even number, I could do I minus equals 2, because I want to subtract 2 each time. And then inside my curly brackets, I could print out I. Okay, so checking this guy out, we're going to take this for loop and apply it to some string stuff. So we have a scanner object, we called it scan. If we want to get text from the user, we can do scan.next, and we're going to assume that the user creates this or enters in this value of hello. All right, so str is a string object, which remember refers to some sort of object, a place in memory. This is more advanced than a primitive data type. All right, and just peeking ahead, I see we're talking about string.length, and I see char at in there. So it seems like perhaps we're going to be dealing with characters involved with that string. So remember, if we're talking about characters involved with the string, each of those characters is thought to be in, has a different place in it, and we refer to those as indices or an index. And remember, when we start numbering our indices for a string, we always start counting at 0. All right, so just something to keep in mind. H would be at 0, E would be at 1, so on and so forth. All right, so we're starting out in this program. I has a beginning value of 0. We're going to keep going as long as I is less than string.length. Okay, well, string.length, that's going to count up how many characters I have cooking within my string object. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 5 characters in my string object. So I'm going to keep in mind that string.length, and just so I have more room, I'm going to indicate that we're essentially saying that we're less than 5. Okay, and each time through, our update is plus plus. Okay, so adding 1 each time. So we're going to print out, and it's println, so we're going to have each item printing out on a new line, and we're saying str.char at I. So the first time through, when we're talking about character 0, now we're talking about character 0 here, so we're printing out an H. We get to the end of our for loop, so we update. So now we're going to print out as long as I is less than 5. All right, great. Okay, we're going to print out E. So it looks like we are printing out each character on a separate line. We have less of an issue of infinite loops with this type of loop. With while loops, it's super easy to forget to include that update within our curly brackets with that for loop header. It's real hard to forget because it's a part of that for loop header, so you know you have it right as you're writing that loop. But with this type of piece, it's super easy to have an off by 1 error. So if I made a mistake and I said less than or equal to string.length, I'm going to have something like an array or some sort of out of bounds error. And we talked about having an out of bounds error earlier when we were dealing with while loops. So if you see that, it's often because you're off by 1. All right. So still, you still can have errors with for loops. Okay. So if we wanted to reverse this and modify the code to print the characters of the word in the reverse order, okay, so here I want to reverse it. So I would say for int I equals, okay, and if I do string.length, okay, remember that's 5, okay, but the maximum characters I have there is -1. So there's only 4 characters if I'm thinking about that hello word. Okay, I want to make sure that I base it off of str, that object, because I'm not guaranteed that every time somebody runs this program, they're going to type in the word hello. I'm going to continue on as long as I is greater than or equal to 0, because I want to include that index at 0. and then each time through, I'm going to subtract 1. And then I would just, because I'm lazy, just include that piece within this curly bracket as well, this str.char at I. All right, so that was a little bit of work with our for loop. Please let me know if you have any questions. I will talk to you later. Bye.